Hey, brothers and sisters, we read in Revelation chapter 6 of the seals that are opened after the rapture of the church, which begins the tribulation period. I want to read some of these seals, and then what I'm going to do is play a clip from Michael Yon as he describes what he is seeing on the world stage right now regarding famine and pestilence. Now, just as a disclaimer, we are not in the tribulation. Everything we're reading about here in the scriptures is yet future. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, "Come and see." Another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another, and there was given him a great sword. When he opened the third seal, I heard the living creature say, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." So this is speaking about famine. And lastly, when he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse. Now, what we see here are two things. In the third seal, we see famine. And in the fourth seal, we see death or pestilence, pandemic. Now, what you're going to hear Michael Yon describing is what he is seeing as a war journalist happening on the world stage right now, setting the stage for the future tribulation.
That nothing destroys a country quite as completely as famine, even more intensely than war. It's severe. Governments rarely survive a famine, by the way. I've read just a couple of dozen books on famine. We're not normally in famines these days. I mean, they do occur still, but famines have been, a drumbeat throughout humanity, throughout human existence. There's a lot of famine in the Bible. One time I mentioned this to you one time before. That I've read many books on pandemic and famine because they go with war. I'm a war correspondent. You can't, if you're going to look at the higher levels of war, you have to study pandemic, and you have to study famine, and you must study migration patterns, and you must, if you're going to get PhD level of war studies, you have to look at economies. There's so much geography, of course, location is very important to war. There's different aspects that it takes years to study, but one of those is famine, and they all go together: pandemic and famine and war. If you get a big famine, you will always get pandemic, and you'll always get war. If you get one, you'll get the other two. I said that a few years ago in an interview, and one of my readers, a kind reader, she said, I talk about that as if I made it up. And I said, I did. And she said, no, it's in the Bible, the 4 horsemen. I was like, yikes, I plagiarized the Bible. But but I didn't realize it's probably source amnesia. The Bible turns out something like a survival manual. I mean, it's everything that we're going through has already happened. It's already happened over and over and over. I love to read old books. And when you read old books, you can safely remove yourself from current politics and install yourself in somebody else's political period. But you'll see that you'll start to watch these patterns pop out. For instance, I read a book on, I think it was from 1889, on a smallpox vaccine, right? This British doctor was going off about how dangerous they are and whatnot. If you read that book, I read it. I think it's 1889. It's on the smallpox vaccine. It could have been written this morning. I mean, there's nothing about it that's new at all. Anyway, the bottom line is all these old books, when you read them, you're like, they wrote better back then, but they're writing exactly the things we write about now, like the 1854 cholera outbreak in London. When you read about that thing, it's day in and day out. If you study these things, you pretty much have an idea what's going to come. And we're clearly going to go into the largest famines that have ever happened on Earth. I mean,
and like you said, the Bible predicts this, actually.
Okay, so you heard what Michael Yon was talking about there, which so perfectly sums up what is predicted in Revelation 6, specifically verse 8, as he was talking about at the end there, "Behold, a pale horse, and the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed him, and power was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with the sword, with hunger, and with death, and by the beasts of the earth. So we see that these three things all go together: famine, pestilence, war, which all equals death. And unfortunately, we're going to see multitudes dying during the tribulation period, but we're also going to see the greatest revival of souls happening in the 7-year tribulation period as God uses the two witnesses, the 144,000, and the many people, the tribulation saints that get saved. So God has still left a remnant on the earth after the church is removed. I just wanted to play that clip for you. I thought it was very fitting what he came up with in his conclusions with all his research. I definitely suggest you go and check out his information and page. He's a wealth of information. So with that said, God bless and Maranatha.